G'day, mate, 40 here. So the Democrats are working really hard to try to seem authentic. And so they've been going on sports talk shows, sports podcasts, sports TV broadcasts, trying to show how with it that they, like Donald Trump, they can talk about sports. And they're also using an unusual amount of profanity. I remember back in about 2011, Donald Trump made a speech in Las Vegas to some conservative group, and he used a few profanities. And Dennis Prager wrote a column at the time saying that Donald Trump will never be elected president of the United States because his language is just unbecoming. Just his use of profanity in a public speech just shows that he is unfit for public office. Now, when Trump uses profanity, it seems authentic, right? It seems real because the profanity doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's part of his overall package where he's both probably the biggest liar that we've ever had as president of the United States and also the biggest truth teller. But now the Democrats are really upping the salty language. It's kind of amusing how inauthentic it feels, just like those embarrassing TikTok videos of showing these female Democratic congresswomen as fighters. So why do the Dems seem so inauthentic? It's because you can't adequately describe reality, right, using politically correct language. Right, as long as you're limited to what is politically correct, right, you are at war with reality. And when you're at war with reality, it's really hard to be authentic. It's impossible to be authentic. So I did my hair special. I hope you appreciate it, mate. So it's hilarious, speaking of inauthenticity, to see Democrats going to battle and the news media going to battle for Mahmoud, this Hamas supporter, who is being detained and deported by the Trump administration. And the news media and the Democrats are framing this as a free speech issue, which is hilarious considering that the left side of the political spectrum, the establishment, the elite, and the Democrats have been consistently working at restricting free speech. Right? During the 2024 election, right, Democrats were on the side of restricting speech. Republicans were much more on the side of expanding speech, expanding the Overton window. So think about all the developments in American life over the past 15 years, in particular the rise of woke, and how that comes dominantly from the left. And the left's platform is controlling you, right? They don't want you to have the ability to educate your own kids from home. They want you to send your children to public schools. They don't want you to drive cars. They want you in public transportation. They don't want you to recognize that different groups have different gifts. Right? So all sorts of basic observations about life, right, get you ruled out of polite conversation. And it's the left, the Democrats, the elites, the mainstream media who have consistently supported this. When you look at surveys of elite opinion versus the opinion of regular Americans, right, the elites are much more on board with speech restriction. Right, regular Americans love their free speech. Right, they love their inappropriate emails. But elites, just a dramatic difference with comparison to regular Americans. They're much more supportive of restrictions on speech, restrictions on economic freedom, to combat global warming or whatever the panic is of the moment. Whoa, I've got a female in watching, right? YouTube tells me that my audience is 100% male, but YouTube is lying. Kirsten is here. She's from LA. Where are you now, Kirsten? So it is only 49 degrees here, which counts as cold. Right, there are very few days where at noon you go outside and it's 49 degrees. So what else is the chat saying? The only thing left to say more than free speech is free speech on campus. The irony is hilarious. Yeah, so it's hilarious that the mainstream media, the elite, the elite lawyers and the Democrats are all framing Khalil Mahmoud as a free speech issue when he's not an American citizen, right? If you're not a citizen of the United States, you're not entitled to all privileges and some of the responsibilities that citizens have. This is unusual. There are no countries where non-citizens get the same rights as citizens. And so during COVID, right, even questioning any of the COVID orthodoxies would get you thrown off of social media platforms, and this was driven by the left, by Democrats. Right, I had a video deleted by YouTube, and I got a strike for saying that if you're outside and it's not a highly congested area, I don't see a lot of benefit from wearing a face mask. Right, that got me a strike. So questioning the orthodoxies, it gets you a strike, whether a literal strike on YouTube or a strike in your life. Right? Those who are aligned with the elite, they can always drop the nuclear bomb on you of negative mainstream media attention. And the mainstream media has consistently opposed free speech on the internet. Right? Oh, people on the internet, they don't have editors. They're not part of an institution. All right? You can't just allow people to freely speak out. You have to regulate that. And now, seriously, they want to frame Mahmoud Khalil as primarily a free speech case, and they want to convince us that Democrats are the free speech party. That's hilarious. They pushed for restrictions on speech with regard to COVID, with regard to questioning the authenticity of the 2020 election returns, with noticing that different groups have different gifts, that even saying that marriage should only be between a man and a woman, right? That will get you ostracized from the traditional conservative reaction to the trans movement is that it's primarily a product of insanity, right? That would get you banned from every major social media platform. There are just all sorts of things that you can't say on public university without getting into a great deal of trouble. But it's cool to promote Hamas, right? That's cool. That's what the Democrats will get behind. Promote Hamas, promote terrorism, promote genocidal hatred against the United States, promote an organization that slaughtered something like 200 plus Americans on October 7th, 2023. Then held hostage dozens of Americans and then killed some of them. Right, promote that, and Democrats will rally for your free speech, even if you're not a citizen here. But for citizens, all right, Democrats generally want to restrict your speech. You couldn't question COVID policies. You couldn't question election integrity. You can't say that different groups have different gifts. Like if you just belong to some kind of men's group, right? The media hates that. The media castigates men's groups. Like the mere existence of a male-only group is highly likely to bring on you all sorts of devastating stories from the media, right? It's not Republicans who are driving that. So civil rights laws, which have been chiefly promoted by Democrats over the past 50 years, right, want to restrict freedom of association, freedom in how you use your private property. Let's say that you're uncomfortable with various new sexual manias that are receiving a lot of celebration these days. Right? You'll get called up by HR. You're very likely to get fired, disciplined, demoted, restricted, banned, castigated. All right, just for not being down with the latest, sexual craze. So the Democrats now want to function as the free speech party for a pro-terror activist, Mahmoud wasn't just making speech in favor of Hamas, but he was actively leading a movement promoting Hamas, right? A movement that slaughtered hundreds of Americans. It's bizarre. So it's a glorious day. It's Purim. Aha. You're now in Seattle. So do you have rain, half the days in Seattle? I think we have sunshine here 330 days a year. So it's Purim. It's a glorious time. I remember my first time going to synagogue on Purim, and you get to shout, scream, and knock yourself out every time they say the name of the bad guy in the Esther story, Haman. And so everyone dresses up in costumes, a lot of drinking, celebrating. There's a Purim Suda, that's a special meal that you have at lunch today. So walking around PK Robertson, noticing people in all sorts of exotic costumes. Humor wasn't a big part of the Jewish oeuvre till Jews became secular. So in the traditional Jewish way of life, right, there wasn't a great deal of humor. And today, the more religious you get on the Jewish spectrum, right, the less likely people are to make jokes and to value humor. And so there are modern Orthodox Jews who are comics, but to the extent that you're a professional comic, all right, that's not a traditional Jewish occupation. It's an example of how even when people seem to be so religious, right, Orthodox Jews, that in our increasingly secular world, right, all sorts of traditional assumptions about life no longer hold sway. So if you're an Orthodox Jew and you make your living in comedy, by and large, that's honored in Orthodox Jewish life, right? It's a panasa, it's a living. It's immediately hard to get your head around why the elite and the Democrats and the media are celebrating the free speech freedoms of Mahmoud Halil, pro-Hamas, terror propagandist and activist, but for increasingly restricting the speech of ordinary Americans on ordinary matters. Right, during the Biden administration, most FBI agents were devoted to researching and coming out with evidence against January 6th prosecutors, and they had a great deal of fear of parents who would speak out at school board meetings, and they'd get labeled terrorists by the Biden administration because they didn't want to go along with this or that public health proclamation or this or that woke dogma. So the Biden administration really did more than any other administration of which I can recall to restrict speech. And even during Trump's first term, even though Trump felt like a catalyst for free speech, the elite, our institutions, big tech, overwhelmingly rose up and significantly restricted our speech from 2016 onwards. Right? the ire that Trump aroused in his first term from the left was much greater, much more effective than the support he aroused on the right. Does more suffering equate to more comedy? I don't think that's a strong correlation. Right? So I'm sure that there is good, strong work done with regard to comedy and what creates comedy. Tell you one thing that does usually equate to more comedy is more IQ. Right? The smarter someone is, the greater their capacity for humor. So not all smart people are funny, but all funny people are smart. So the higher the IQ of the group, I would expect the more comedy. Also, the more spontaneous the group. So African Americans are disproportionately successful in comedy because they are, by and large, the most spontaneous of all the major population groups in the United States. They have the least filter. They are the least inhibited. They are the least likely to restrict their speech just to rote reactions. They are the most lively, the most vibrant, the most real. And so groups that are emotionally expressive and emotionally uninhibited and the most intense, I think, are probably going to be the most likely to be funny.